I now call upon Frank Menz to propose the toast to our honoured guest and friend, Dennis.
I was delighted, first of all, that I had the chance to shake Dennis by the hand this evening, because up until tonight I had never called him anything else except Sir. And I felt that calling him by his Christian name, without having had the chance at least to remind him who I am, would have been a little forward. So one target has been achieved. My first memory of Dennis was in F3B, which was one of those really high-ceiling classrooms in the junior school. And I don't know what time of year it was, but I don't think it was particularly warm outside. And one of the master who was ever supposed to be teaching us Latin on that day, was unavailable, and it was Dennis who came in to teach us. We already knew of his fearsome reputation. And so it proved, because we shivered for the entire lesson after, I don't know whether you remember, those long poles with little flattened S's on the top. And every single one of those was brought into play as every single window at the highest level was open. And in fact, funnily enough, Griff Rhys-Jones in his autobiography does actually mention, I'm afraid he gets his name wrong, but does actually mention a master at school who was famous for opening every single window in the classroom, whatever time of year it might be.
Joe would have done the same.
As I look at, I have to say, with my contemporaries now, of whom I have some around this table, as I look at the people who I recognise here, I think we've all sort of grown old at the same rate, I think. And nobody feels particularly significantly older to look at than when we were all at school together. But I think that Dennis has achieved something extraordinary, because I don't think he looks, speaking entirely objectively, any older than he looked when he taught me in 1975. And I think the clue to this, and this is where I plug my favourite writer, Anthony Pohl has one of his characters say in A Buyer's Market. He says, "It is extraordinary how schoolmasters never grow older. They find a cruising speed at an early age and stick to it." And that, I think, Yuri, is exactly what has happened. And Dennis is an extraordinarily fortunate man in that respect. People were kind enough over the last, whatever it was, 3 months since I first consented to make this speech, to fire heaven knows how much material at me. None of it, of course, is actually damaging. A lot of it is quite funny, although you may have had to be there. But some of these things are just brilliant. There was somebody, I wish I could remember names, but please excuse me, but it was a bit of a blizzard of emails. Told me about an occasion when Dennis was supposedly, I think, teaching, I don't know whatever form, but they distracted him by talking about Italy onto the subject of coffee. And Dennis spent the entire 40 or 45 minutes talking about how Italian coffee bars are run, complete with impersonations of what Gadger machines sound like. I was also given the story. Well, in fact, I was personally present at this one, but probably most people of whatever generation had experienced this one. Dennis's habit of leaning backwards in his chair as he sat at the desk. One other thing, I like this line. I did, of course, plough through the quotations books looking for amusing lines about the various interests of Dennis. And the only one I will pass on, because I think this is quite funny, is a golf one. Gerald Ford said that he knew his golf was getting better because he was hitting fewer spectators. But I do actually want to end seriously, because we all here do owe Dennis, and he thinks I'm not going to try and overwhelm him with praise, but I'm afraid I am. He did ask me not to, but that's completely irrelevant on an occasion. When we were doing Horace Odes 3 as our set book, and I suspect practically everybody here did Horace Odes 3 as one of their set books. And if you didn't, then you were lucky. Horace Odes 3:21, O nata me cum console manlio. And he's doing that expression he did when he first. It became something living and wonderful, and that is down to what Dennis could do with what could, in other hands, have been some really quite dry material. And that Pia Testa has lived with me for my entire life, and why that book, more than any other book that I learned in the sixth form, sits opened fairly often on my bookshelf. And I think that anyone who can take a set text, turn it into something that lives with you for your rest of your life, someone who has transformed the lives of everybody here by what he taught us and by what he enabled us to achieve, deserves the highest praise, the highest praise. And I ask you all now to stand and toast Dennis Riddiford, the man who changed our lives.